I don't think there's any consensus on that. So the UN actually does have obviously formal ambassadors for things. But beyond that, they have honorary ambassadors, honorary dignitaries who support certain causes, who are usually people who are of public stature that everybody knows. In the profession of mediation, there are people like George Mitchell, who mediated the Northern Ireland conflict, who has now been asked to provide assistance in Gaza, who are known throughout the world to be an international mediator. But there's no core criteria for what that is or how do you become one. In our own country, there's the guy who organized the 9/11 Commission, and he's sort of risen to become one of these experts. So typically, you're somebody who has training, you've taken mediation courses, you become certified, you have a certain amount of experience, you then get your first high-level case, and if you do well, people then know about you. If you do horrible, then you hope they don't know about you. But mediation is a very thankless field in one aspect, and it's not for everyone, because when you're the mediator, if the parties reach resolution, all the credit to the parties. They did it, and they really did through the process. But if the parties didn't reach resolution, and even worse, delve back into a conflict that's at a more intense level, then the mediator takes the blame. That's part of the safety for the participants. So it's, when you get to be George Mitchell's level, where it's worked really well, it seems really good. But there are a lot of people at sort of the medium level who are doing great work who just aren't as well known. So one of my favorite books at the moment is Thich Nhat Hanh. It's called The Heart of Buddha's Teaching, and it's particularly pertinent for peace building, both in the community level and at the international level. It kind of breaks down the spiritual angle in a way that's relevant to international diplomats. Another book I would recommend is by Ken Cloak, who is the president of Mediators Beyond Borders, and he's a mediator from Santa Monica, and many of you probably know him, and he's a former teacher and mentor of mine, and he's written a book called Conflict Revolution, and it's available on Amazon, and it's also about bridging the gap between international level and personal level, in that we cannot afford to sort of think about that as happening out there and this is in here, but indeed, why are we all connected? How can we affect each other in positive ways? And on the third, I'll have to come back to you because I can't think of just one more off the top of my head. But in terms of websites, there is an organization called mediate.com, and they have a lot of articles about conflict resolution that can help you learn about what is this field, how does it work, who's involved. And also at the international level, I would recommend strongly the U.S. Institute of Peace website. It's www.usip.org. And that's, they have wonderful resources for teachers, for educational tools, for understanding. They have briefings on understanding conflicts. So they would have a white paper on Gaza that breaks down exactly what's happening and why. And it's a really objective, neutral, sort of scholarly, if you will, look at conflict and why it's happening. Well, I think that it's always difficult without all the details, but if I could offer any advice, it would be for you to focus on you. And in a way, that seems selfish, but in a way, it's what will help you resolve any outstanding problems or challenges. So if it's helpful to you to engage her and to have this sort of opportunity for her to then repeat old behaviors and old patterns that you found harmful, then that's one choice. If it's helpful for you to find a way to disengage, and I don't know that you can, seeing how she lives next to you, and be in a place where it is no longer a challenge that you have to face. So that's, first course of action. If you found that you can talk with her directly in a way that's constructive for you both, then encourage that. If you found that there's some underlying reason for this continuation, there's some external cause, and you think that having a mediator or having an external source would help the two of you work this out once and for all, then that's another option. But it can be, I think you bring a personal point that's a larger issue for a lot of folks, which is this idea is, does peace have to mean surrender? Do you have to give up? Do you have to compromise away all of your interests and rights? And the answer is no. And it's a delicate balance to pursue peace in a way that preserves your own integrity, preserves your own needs and your own interests, and strikes the right balance. There's no one answer to that question, but it's not to suggest that people should somehow be the martyr and lie down and let people run over them. Not at all. I think that you do raise something, a little bit of information that might be hopeful for you, is that the White House is considering creating an Office of Consensus Building. And consensus building is a formal way of doing what you just suggested, helping people coordinate. It was written by a guy named Larry Susskind, who's a former professor of mine at MIT. And it's the way that Obama's campaign ran the campaign, building consensus among disparate groups, different diverse groups, to reach common goals. And there are specific steps that you do in that process. But we do need that at many levels. Education is critical. And I think that we've always faced a challenge in the United States, which is to keep education local or to have it national. And when you allow people to make their own decisions in the communities where they live, and you keep things local, that has a lot of benefits. But one of the costs is keeping coordinated across all the many different groups. So it's a question that you raise that's very vital for the kids, and change has to happen because we're at a point in the education system where the old systems aren't adequate. And hopefully we can do it through consensus, through building cooperation with each other.